I woke up to the delightful morning sound of someone absolutely losing their mind. And not just any someone. Karen, our neighborhood's self-anointed monarch. There she was, teetering on the edge of my front yard, face blazing red like a traffic light, screaming her lungs out. And the reason? Her shiny new luxury SUV was helplessly stuck, smack in the middle of a deep trench I had, quite legally, carved around my driveway. Oh, and yes, complete with a functioning medieval-style drawbridge that I could raise like I was guarding a castle. Flashback to 2 weeks earlier, and none of this insanity would have made any sense. I was just your typical guy trying to enjoy suburban life, grilling on weekends, waving at neighbors, minding my own business. But serenity isn't an option when the head of the HOA rules the block like she's got her own royal court. Karen was the type to measure grass blades with a ruler, threaten fines over slightly off beige paint, and send angry letters if your car had a hint of dust on it. I'd dealt with her drama before, but I never thought it would spiral into a full-on suburban showdown. It all began one otherwise peaceful morning. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, ready to start my day, only to find Karen's oversized SUV parked directly across my driveway. At first, I thought maybe she'd just pulled in briefly, but no. There she was, arms folded, standing smugly like she was about to ruin someone's morning. Mine, apparently. "Good morning, Karen," I said, keeping my tone friendly. "Your car's blocking my driveway." She grinned like she'd just caught a mouse in a trap. "Oh, I'm aware," she replied sweetly. "It's HOA business. We've received complaints about your driveway." I raised an eyebrow. "Complaints from who exactly?" "That's confidential," she said with a wave of her hand. "But the HOA board decided your driveway isn't up to code." I glanced at my driveway, just plain normal concrete. Nothing extravagant, nothing wrong. "That's absurd. It's completely fine." Karen casually studied her nails. "Well, sadly, it's not up to you. Until we complete a full review, I'll need to keep my car here to prevent any further issues." I blinked, half expecting her to laugh. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," she chirped, pulling out a clipboard and jotting something down. "And by the way, if you try to tow my car, that'll be considered harassment. HOA protocol." I wanted to snap, to yell, to say anything, but I knew better. Karen lived for drama. She wanted a reaction, one she could turn into more fines or complaints. So I just breathed deep, gave her a polite nod, and turned around to go back inside. The following days were an absolute nightmare. Each morning, without fail, Karen's SUV remained glued across my driveway like it was part of the landscape. I contacted the HOA, useless. I called a tow truck, no help there either. They mumbled something about a community clause and refused to intervene. Meanwhile, Karen strutted around like she had just secured beachfront property, basking in her self-made victory. Then the letters started coming. Apparently, the HOA had decided I was now guilty of failing to maintain my driveway. The irony? I couldn't even access it. But that didn't stop them from treating me like a repeat offender. Every time I opened the mailbox, there was a brand new notice demanding payment for some made-up violation. It was maddening, but I wasn't about to back down. If Karen was going to stoop low, I was going to aim smart. So I did what any determined wronged homeowner would do. I buried myself in research. If the HOA could twist the rulebook, so could I. I spent nights combing through zoning laws, legal loopholes, and obscure property codes until, bingo, I hit gold. A single sentence buried in the local code changed everything. There were no restrictions on temporary security upgrades to private property. As long as the changes weren't permanent, I could build whatever I wanted. Just to be sure, I ran it by a lawyer friend. His verdict? Totally legit. That's when the real fun started. The very next morning, I rented an excavator. I called up a crew of contractors and gave them a wild instruction. Dig me a trench, a deep, wide one, all the way around my driveway. Not a little drainage ditch, a literal moat, the kind that would make a medieval knight proud. The workers looked at me like I'd lost it, but I waved cash and they got to work. By sunset, my property looked like it belonged in a castle siege movie. A 4-foot deep trench circled my driveway, too wide for any vehicle to pass, including, of course, Karen's. When morning came, she marched over, prepared to celebrate whatever drama she had planned next. But when she saw her luxury SUV stranded like a maroon ship in the center of the trench, her face fell faster than a dropped glass. "What the hell is this?" she screamed. "Security enhancement," I said casually, trying not to laugh. "Totally within HOA guidelines." Her eyes started twitching. "You can't just dig a giant hole around my car." Sure I can, I replied. It's on my property, and since you refuse to move your car, I just built around it. She blinked like her mental hard drive had just crashed. This is illegal. I whipped out a copy of the zoning ordinance. Actually, no, it's perfectly legal. I even filed a permit. The city signed off on it. Karen clenched her jaw like she was about to chew through steel. You'll pay for this, she growled. The HOA will never let this slide. I shrugged. Guess we'll find out. And with that, I turned and walked back inside, leaving her seething in silence. But here's the kicker. I wasn't finished. The trench was just phase one. Karen had no idea that the next part of my plan involved something much, much better. The drawbridge. The following morning, I was jolted awake by a storm of aggressive pounding on my front door. I didn't even need to check. I already knew who it was. Sure enough, there stood Karen, looking like she'd spent the entire night drafting revenge blueprints. Her face was crimson, her fists clenched, and the second I cracked the door open, she jabbed a polished, furious finger straight into my chest. You need to fill in that trench right now, she hissed, barely containing herself. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee and let the silence drag out just long enough to see the twitch in her eye deepen. Oh, you're talking about the trench? Yeah, I'm afraid that's not going anywhere. It's a security feature. Perfectly legal, actually. She let out a noise that was equal parts growl and banshee screech. You have exactly 24 hours to fix this, or I'll make sure the HOA buries you in fines. I tilted my head thoughtfully. Funny timing. I was just about to start on a new upgrade. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of upgrade? I smiled. A drawbridge. Karen's jaw dropped. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again, like a fish trying to process quantum physics. You can't seriously install a drawbridge in the middle of a neighborhood. Actually, I can, I said calmly. I've reviewed the regulations. As long as the structure isn't permanent, I'm well within my rights. Think of it as added protection for my driveway. Shouldn't the HOA appreciate that? She looked like she was ready to hurl her purse at me. Instead, she spun on her heels and stormed off, mumbling something about city permits, lawsuits, and how I was going to pay for this. I had no illusions. Karen was going to throw everything she had at me, but I had done my research, crossed every T, dotted every I, and this time I was actually excited to see how far she'd go. Over the next few days, I got to work. I ordered supplies, brought in a couple of experienced contractors, and began construction. I didn't need anything extravagant, just sturdy lumber, durable hinges, and a reliable pulley system. I even documented the whole process on video, partially for legal proof, but mostly because I had a feeling the internet would eat this up. As the drawbridge took shape, Karen stepped up her campaign. She called the city, dragging inspectors out to my property. They arrived expecting to find violations but left empty-handed. Everything was 100% within code. She even tried rallying the other homeowners with a petition, but most of them had been dying for someone to take her down a peg. Her final play? Blocking the contractors at the gate until one of them casually mentioned he was the brother of a city council member. That backfired fast. By the time the final bolt was in place, the neighborhood was buzzing. Everyone had gathered to witness the spectacle. The drawbridge stood tall, simple, functional, and undeniably awesome. I gave it a test run, pulling the rope slowly and watching as the platform lifted into the air, cutting off driveway access completely. It was glorious. Naturally, Karen absolutely lost it. This is outrageous! You can't just build a medieval fortress in a residential area, she shrieked. It's not a fortress, I replied deadpan. It's a security feature. You know, protection for my property. Pretty sure the HOA handbook encourages those. She let out a noise somewhere between a gasp and a screech, then stomped off like a cartoon villain. She looked like she was ready to hurl her purse at me. Instead, she spun on her heels and stormed off, mumbling something about city permits, lawsuits, and how I was going to pay for this. I had no illusions. Karen was going to throw everything she had at me, but I had done my research, crossed every T, dotted every I, and this time I was actually excited to see how far she'd go. Over the next few days, I got to work. I ordered supplies, brought in a couple of experienced contractors, and began construction. I didn't need anything extravagant, just sturdy lumber, durable hinges, and a reliable pulley system. I even documented the whole process on video, partially for legal proof, but mostly because I had a feeling the internet would eat this up. As the drawbridge took shape, Karen stepped up her campaign. She called the city, dragging inspectors out to my property. They arrived expecting to find violations but left empty-handed. Everything was 100% within code. She even tried rallying the other homeowners with a petition, but most of them had been dying for someone to take her down a peg. Her final play? Blocking the contractors at the gate until one of them casually mentioned he was the brother of a city council member. That backfired fast. By the time the final bolt was in place, the neighborhood was buzzing. Everyone had gathered to witness the spectacle. The drawbridge stood tall, simple, functional, and undeniably awesome. I gave it a test run, pulling the rope slowly and watching as the platform lifted into the air, cutting off driveway access completely. It was glorious. Naturally, Karen absolutely lost it. "This is outrageous. You can't just build a medieval fortress in a residential area," she shrieked. "It's not a fortress," I replied deadpan. "It's a security feature. You know, protection for my property. Pretty sure the HOA handbook encourages those." She let out a noise somewhere between a gasp and a screech, then stomped off like a cartoon villain. But I was ready. What she didn't know was that I'd been quietly building a case of my own. I'd collected records, emails, and receipts, proof that she'd been misusing HOA funds for her personal shopping, meals, and even what looked suspiciously like vacation expenses. Apparently, Karen wasn't as meticulous with her paperwork as she was with everyone else's fences. I assembled it all, every shady transaction and fabricated fine, into a tidy little folder. I was just waiting for the right moment to unleash it. And that moment came at the emergency HOA meeting she called to discuss my supposed violations. As I walked into the room, I could see the self-satisfaction radiating off her. Sitting tall at the head of the table, clipboard in hand, she looked ready to deliver her final ruling. "After careful review," she said with a smug smile, "we've determined your recent property modifications violate neighborhood standards. You'll need to dismantle them immediately or face legal consequences." I leaned forward with a calm smile and slid a folder across the table. "That's funny, because I've come across a few violations myself." Karen's smug expression twitched. "What are you talking about?" I flipped the folder open and began reading aloud. Fraudulent fines, misappropriated HOA funds, harassment of home owners, item after item, each one more damning than the last. With every sentence, her face drained a little more color. "You're making this up," she snapped, though her voice had lost its bite. "I have the receipts," I said, lifting a stack of documents, "and I'm more than happy to share them with the authorities." The room fell into a heavy silence. The other board members, who had spent months pretending not to notice her reign of terror, were now leaning in, eyes wide, suddenly very interested in my evidence. It didn't take long. In under 10 minutes, Karen was officially voted out as HOA president, and by the end of that week, a formal investigation into her conduct was already underway. That night, I stood at the edge of my driveway, sipping something cold and watching as Karen's prized SUV was finally hauled off. Not by my doing, but by city officials. What started out as a wild idea, a trench and a drawbridge, had become the perfect trap to expose her abuse of power. And the icing on the cake? My driveway had never looked so clean and peaceful. For a few days after that fateful HOA meeting, Karen vanished from sight, which honestly was more unsettling than her usual antics. She wasn't the type to retreat without plotting her next move. I could feel it in the air. She was simmering, waiting. Meanwhile, the neighborhood had transformed. People who once avoided eye contact now waved enthusiastically. Some even stopped by just to admire the drawbridge. I became a bit of a suburban folk hero. Even the mailman gave me a grin and a salute one morning. But I wasn't foolish enough to think the war was over. And sure enough, the backlash arrived, quiet at first. An anonymous complaint hit the city offices, accusing me of illegal construction. A zoning inspector came by to investigate, clearly expecting some kind of disaster. But after a quick look at my setup, he shrugged, gave me a respectful nod, and left with a smirk. Then came the phony neighbor complaints, reports of noise in the middle of the night, vague claims of suspicious behavior, and even accusations that my trench was a threat to public safety. I knew exactly where it was coming from, but unless I had her on video again, it was just more of the same, petty sabotage from a sore loser. Then Karen decided to raise the stakes. One night, a thunderous crash jolted me out of bed. My heart pounded as I rushed to the window. At first, everything looked normal, but the moment I flipped on the exterior lights, my stomach sank. The drawbridge was destroyed, its ropes slashed clean through, the platform half submerged in the trench, its wooden planks splintered and broken. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security cam feed, and there she was, Karen, dressed head to toe in black like a budget ninja, bolt cutters in hand. She had actually climbed into the trench and sabotaged the mechanism herself. I didn't hesitate. I dialed the police on the spot. By the time the officers arrived, Karen had scurried back to her house, but I had everything they needed. The footage showed her clearly, red-handed. It wasn't long before they knocked on her door, and after a few minutes of loud arguing, she was escorted outside, still yelling that she was the victim. She tried to spin a wild tale about eliminating a safety hazard, but the officers weren't buying it. They cuffed her on the spot, trespassing and property damage. And let me tell you, watching her get loaded into the back of that police cruiser, easily one of the most satisfying sights of my life. The neighborhood lit up the next day. The gossip spread like wildfire. Turns out Karen had made enemies all over the place, but until now, nobody had dared to challenge her. Several neighbors quietly admitted they dreamed of standing up to her, but fear of retaliation kept them quiet. Now that she'd been publicly arrested, the HOA board had no choice but to act. They held an emergency vote and kicked her out completely. No more influence, no more power. It wasn't even close, unanimous. And still, the story wasn't over. A few days later, I got an email from an investigator working HOA fraud cases. Turns out Karen's shady finances had raised red flags at a higher level. They wanted to talk, specifically about the documents I'd brought to the meeting. I gave them everything. Every bogus fine, every suspicious payment, every dime that didn't add up. Within a week, what started as a neighborhood drama turned into a full-blown criminal investigation. Karen wasn't just a control freak with a clipboard, she was a full-on con artist. She'd been siphoning HOA funds for years to cover luxury vacations, designer shopping sprees, and some highly questionable overseas accounts. When the news finally hit, the neighborhood went absolutely wild. People who used to avoid eye contact with Karen were suddenly cracking jokes at her expense. A few even hung up banners that read, "Free at last." No one was hiding their relief anymore. Not long after her house went up for sale, but it lingered on the market because, let's be honest, nobody was itching to buy the ex-residence of the neighborhood tyrant. Eventually, she was forced to sell it for a loss and quietly disappear. On moving day, I stood at the edge of my property, coffee in hand, watching her load the last of her belongings into the truck. She shot me one final glare, but it was empty. All the venom was gone. She'd been beaten. I raised my mug in a silent salute as the truck rolled away. Karen's departure sent shockwaves through the HOA. Most of the remaining board members jumped ship, and the community held a vote to disband the entire thing. No more nitpicking, no more arbitrary fines, no more threats, just peace. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt free. As for me, I unintentionally became a legend. Word of the trench and drawbridge saga spread like wildfire. News crews reached out, interviews rolled in, the videos blew up online. People from around the world started messaging me, some just to say thanks, others looking for tips on how to stand up to their own overreaching HOAs. The drawbridge, now fully restored, became a permanent neighborhood fixture. Kids dubbed my place Castle Jake. I even put up a small plaque by the trench that read, "In memory of HOA tyranny." It got a lot of laughs and sparked even more conversation. One evening while I was flipping steaks in the backyard, one of the longtime residents wandered over. He was an older gentleman, quiet type, who'd seen Karen's nonsense unfold over the years. "You know," he said, watching the sun sink behind the rooftops, "I figured someone would take her down eventually, but I never guessed it would be with a moat and a drawbridge." I chuckled. Sometimes creativity is the best weapon. He nodded. "Well, whatever it was, it worked. This place feels right again." I smiled, flipping the next steak. "Yeah, it really does. And for the first time since I moved in, I didn't just live here. I felt like I belonged." If you've ever faced off against a power-drunk HOA, this one's for you. One man, one trench, one drawbridge, and one epic takedown of a corrupt HOA president. Like if you'd fight back just as hard. Subscribe for more real-world revenge stories. Comment, "HOA reform now." Share with anyone trapped in a rule-happy nightmare. And trust me, you'll want to watch till the end. The finale? Absolutely legendary.